do the intro here. But I think we all need t-shirts that say I love broccoli. Kale's got its thing going on, but we need a broccoli presence to compete with kale here. So
Chad,
welcome everybody. What was that, Tony?
Chad, you have a t-shirt, right? Or
I have a t-shirt which I just, I did a podcast with Rhonda Patrick, and I have to show you they produce t-shirts which are the Sprouting Radical Club, and there's a sulforaphane molecule on it. And they also have one that just says sulforaphane on it. So yes, I'm a proud recipient. I sent Tony one. They gave me a few of them. So anyway.
I love that. I think also for the next holiday season, we need a whole series of green shirts with like a friendly little broccoli on it, like just for kids too. So with that note, hello everybody. It looks like everybody's assembling here, which is great. I am Deanna Minich, and I want to thank all of you for being here. And I want to thank our guests. My vision for this was to go deep and really get into all things broccoli. I feel like many times we gloss over all of these different foods. We talk about a plant-based diet, but we don't actually get into the nitty-gritty. And so we're going to do that within this particular webinar. So big gratitude to our guest today. We have Tony Talalay, who is the CEO of Brassica Protection Products. You can find their teas and coffees and their True Brock product embedded into many different dietary supplements. We're going to talk about sulforaphane and what you've done, and really carrying on the lineage of your father, who had done a lot of this research decades ago. And then we have Dr. Jed Fahey, who is at Johns Hopkins and has been carrying on with the research on cruciferous vegetables, especially broccoli. So welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
All right, so let's dive in, everybody. Again, I've got a lot of questions, and I think the way we do this is, again, this is going to be very practical. We want to give you the news to use, and so we're going to pepper in some things about where you can get certain products, how to cook certain foods. And so I think that, one of the biggest questions I see on the list is about how do you actually prepare broccoli in the average daily diet in order to maximize its nutrients. So without even talking about the nutrients and getting into all the biochemistry, just what's the big takeaway here? Here we are in the midst of a pandemic. Is frozen broccoli as good as fresh? Is fresh as good as raw and maybe slightly steamed? Maybe if you can just talk with us about how to prepare broccoli to maximize its benefits.
Well, so thanks for having me, Deanna, for having us. I'm not a dietitian, and I actually am a cook, meaning that I enjoy cooking. But so from the perspective of a nutritional biochemist, though, I can tell you that if you want the full benefit of this glucoraphanin and myrosinase and sulforaphane enzyme conversion system, which we can talk about if you'd like, but if you want the full phytochemical punch from broccoli, cooking it lightly or microwaving it or steaming it lightly is a good idea. However, eating it raw is fine too. I know you had some questions from people about the gas production from broccoli, and certainly eating a lot of raw broccoli can lead to gas formation, and therefore a lot of people prefer to cook it. And it's loaded with fiber. I mean, when I think of broccoli and I sort of take my phytochemist's hat on, I think about the fiber because it is jam-packed with it. Some of that is indigestible, or human beings don't have alpha-galactosidase, which is an enzyme that's required to break down raffinose, and raffinose is a trisaccharide, 3 simple sugars together: glucose, galactose, and fructose. And our meager bodies don't have the enzyme to break that down. So it goes into the large intestine and it's fermented by bacteria there, by our microbiome, and it causes gas. So So I had to get to gas for the first question, but the bottom line is that when you eat raw broccoli, you're getting unadulterated, you're getting a lot of fiber, and you have to do something with it, and breaking it down and having gas formation is, one of the things that happens. I think most people would argue that or I think most people's observation is you get less of that with cooked broccoli. But there's nothing to detoxify from the perspective of toxins in broccoli, so there's no need to cook it if you enjoy eating it raw. If you have the teeth for it, eat a couple of pounds. I don't know, does that go where you were looking to go?
Yeah, so my takeaway from what you said is perhaps just steaming it a little bit or eating it raw, that both seem to apply, and that you're getting different things when you do so.
You are, and the one thing you don't want to do is to steam it or cook it a lot and then get rid of the water, the pot liquor, if you will, that seeps out of it, unless you're planning on getting rid of a fair amount of the phytochemicals that are in that broccoli. Certainly vitamin C, which broccoli is rich in, and glucoraphanin, sulforaphane will go into the pot liquor, and you'll lose it if you really cook the hell out of the broccoli. If you make a soup or stew or something with it, then you've captured those compounds. Although you could argue about how effective that vitamin C is going to be. Honestly, I don't know. But
And I'm sure you get this question a lot. We have Janet asking, and we also had this on our list of questions about goitrogens, and eating it raw if you have thyroid issues could be problematic. And Tony, you probably have, you've been in the field for a long time as well, where you hear this question maybe even about the teas. Are goitrogens an issue? Do you inactivate the goitrogens with the heat?
Tony, do you mind if I answer that? So this is a question I know Tony gets, and it's a question that I certainly hear a lot of. First of all, if you're talking about broccoli sprouts, which we haven't talked about yet, but specifically broccoli sprouts, there are essentially no goitrogens in them. If you're talking about the supplement that Tony's company makes, there are no goitrogens in those supplements because they come from broccoli seeds or sprouts. So market stage or mature broccoli, what we all grew up on, what we were mostly used to, has some compounds which in extreme excess can have been associated with goiter. They're called indole glucosinolates, or indoles. But frankly, cabbage and rutabaga and kohlrabi and some of the other cold crops or brassica crops have a lot more of those compounds. And I should just point out that I was integrally involved in a trial in China in which we were looking at the effects of broccoli sprout extract on broccoli seed extract, actually, on air pollution injury. And samples from that trial were later used. It was a large trial. Later, it was large in the scope of trials we've done. It wasn't a huge, NIH monster trial, but samples were examined for effect on thyroid function, and there was absolutely no effect of relatively high dose of the glucoraphanin-rich extract on any of the components of thyroid function that were measured by a number of experts. Can you create problems by eating exclusively cruciferous vegetables? Yeah, I'm sure you can. I mean, that's one of the places where goiter and thyroid problems were identified. But that was literally feeding rabbits exclusively cruciferous, exclusively cabbage, and there was something a term which was coined cabbage goiter. This was a classic study actually done at Johns Hopkins by a guy named Chesney. And eating it in moderation, or even eating it as an enthusiastic, as Tony's dad used to call people who ate a lot of broccoli, an enthusiastic broccoli eater, is not going to be a problem.
Okay. Tony, anything further to add on that based on what you've seen in the industry?
Well, we're gonna, I think, talk about products that are made by us or that contain the extract that's made by us. And as Jed mentioned, I mean, one of the many things that we do to ensure the quality is we only extract from broccoli seeds, and broccoli seeds at that stage of the product's life, of the plant's life, don't have these indoles. So we actually know that there are none of those compounds in the extract, the broccoli extract that we make. And it's a function of the age of the plant that we extract from.
So I think it was Janet. I'm not following the questions, but I think it was Janet who said something about, well, what if you have thyroid condition? One thing that I want to make very clear is that I'm not a physician, and whoever's listening, I'm not your physician, and none of us, I think, are making any representations about curing existing disease. So, I mean, we're talking about, in the case of dietary supplements or recommended consumption, we're talking about essentially healthy people. If you have a specific medical condition, of course, this is something you should talk to your healthcare practitioner about, your physician, your alternative practitioner, and care needs to be taken. So we all have various things wrong with us as we get older, and so you do have to be attentive to pre-existing conditions that may be contraindicated. And so I guess the further answer to that question is perhaps people with thyroid conditions shouldn't eat a huge amount of raw broccoli, market stage broccoli. But I can say unequivocally that broccoli sprouts and seeds and extracts made from them do not have the complicating factors that market stage broccoli likely has, depending on the cultivar or the variety.
Well, Jed, I think you also talk about the fact that the plants develop the compounds at different stages of their lives when they can have different functions for the plants. After all, plants are making these compounds not for us, but for them. And so I'll paraphrase you, or I'll speak in your behalf and say something to the effect that the indoles are actually grow in the plants when they get much bigger because they help prevent birds from eating them, or they have some sort of protective effect. And that when the plant is small at the sprout or seed stage, it's concentrated with these other compounds which repel insects and so forth. So it's just a fact of how the plant grows. So
well, we should all channel Michael Pollan. You may or may not like him, but clearly his ability to write about this stuff surpasses mine anyway. I won't speak for anybody else, but he made a statement which I need to find and post on my computer so I can remember it, but something to the effect of while human beings were developing their ability to walk and run and so on and so forth, plants basically being stuck in the ground had to develop a nefarious collection of nasty compounds to fight off predators. He said it eloquently, I didn't, but the bottom line is, as Tony said, that different stages of plants, including broccoli, including all plants that we eat, all vegetables, have evolved a variety of protective chemicals. We call them phytochemicals. They're small molecules, and typically they're the things that give plant color, which you certainly write about eloquently, Deanna. They give plants color, they give plants the pigment, they give them the smell. Some of these compounds attract pollinators, some of them repel predators. But the bottom line is, as Tony mentioned, we as human beings, and his father was the one who really was one of the pioneers in pointing this out. These compounds get repurposed by human beings once they chow down on these plants. And although, yes, they may be toxic to a caterpillar looper or a fall armyworm or whatever the heck pest is on the broccoli plants behind Tony there, we as human beings, in many cases, repurpose them for our protection. Exceptions include things like nicotine and, and some of the opiates. They're certainly toxins in plants, but we avoid them. They're not on our dinner plate by and large, unless you eat. Well, go ahead.
Well, and they have the protective matrix of whatever else is in the plant, right? And that's kind of the essence of herbal medicine, is that you put a primary herb together with secondary herbs to support the action. And that's the beauty of plants. Whereas when you start to look at a supplement, as you start to bring it down to the extract level, you start to change the nature of how it acted in the plant. I just want to say one thing for everybody too, before we leave this thyroid goitrogen issue, is that my take, and you two can tell me, is that we have modified how we consume plants significantly. And I look at all the people doing raw smoothies, taking vegetables, juicing them, having raw kale smoothies on a daily basis. I don't think many people are putting in broccoli to their smoothies, but I do see some of the other crucifers are brought in high amounts. And like, we're just drinking this as liquid nutrition. So I think one of my defaults is to look at the history of safe use. How did people consume broccoli way back when? Did they steam it? Did they have it in broths and in soups? Did they eat it raw sometimes? And I think that there's probably some things that we're learning about the gut microbiome and how we are changing the gut microbiome through the intake of those particular modified vegetable formats. So anyway, I love what you're saying. I love this idea of the plants protecting themselves, but then those compounds go on to protect us in some way too. But it's about how they've been eaten throughout time.
Indeed. Well, it's interesting when you use broccoli as an example. Kale probably is a better example, because of all of the cruciferous vegetables, of all of the vegetables that we commonly eat, broccoli is actually something that only became a staple on the dinner plate about 100 years ago or so. I mean, it was known, it was eaten in the Mediterranean region where it developed and evolved. But it was brought, I think it was in 1910 or something, it was brought to the US by some Italian immigrants who started cultivating it here. And so we in the United States have not been eating broccoli that long, but there's history of safe use of all the other crucifers for centuries, for millennia even. Yeah.
So what was eaten?
Not disagreeing with you.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that you give that as a context, because I wasn't even sure how long broccoli had been eaten. And it'd be interesting to look at the different crucifers versus broccoli. And I'm kind of curious, because my take on the science is that it would behoove us to be eating the broccoli leaves and even the stem, aside from the floret, that each of those components of the plant actually have some merit or some benefit. And I don't know, maybe you can start talking with us about sulforaphane and the different phytochemicals in certain parts of the plant. Perhaps that's relevant to note.
Well, I mean, this goes hand in hand with what Tony was saying as the pseudoscientist businessman among us, Tony. But yeah, as the plant grows, it has different needs for protecting itself and for growing. So the broccoli seed has one array of phytochemicals. So for example, the seed is about a third fat or oils, and those fats are high energy and they nurture the developing sprout. So as the plant sprouts over the course of 3 or 4 days, it uses up all of those fats. And but in that period of the first small number of days, there's a certain spectrum of protective phytochemicals, including something called glucoraphanin, which is activated by an enzyme that's also present in the plant tissue called myrosinase, and it causes a rearrangement and forms a molecule called sulforaphane. Sulforaphane has huge, as Tony's dad discovered in 1992, huge chemoprotective value. And then we discovered that broccoli sprouts have very high levels of it. Also, Paul's original discovery was in market stage broccoli. So, but then what happens? So you've got a seed that is growing in the soil, unless you're sprouting it on your table, and it's got to protect itself mainly against bacteria and fungi that attack it in the soil, damping off diseases and various things like that. But as it grows into the kind of plant that you see behind Tony, it's got a bunch of leaves that are attractive to caterpillars and other munching, chewing bugs. So it changes the spectrum of protective compounds, and it doesn't have nearly as much glucoraphanin compared to some of these so-called indole glucosinolates. We won't go into the chemistry, but it's just a different compound that caterpillars, by and large, don't like. And then Tony, it's a great prop that you have. If you take the crop behind Tony, I think there probably are broccoli heads in that crop right now. On the row behind him, I can't really see them, but if you then let that crop go farther, those broccoli heads turn into flowers, the flowers open up, and they form seeds eventually. So you have this cycle, and each component of the cycle, each plant form, each plant organ has a different spectrum of protective compounds. And so you'll even find that, I mean, you mentioned the stalk. The stalk is obviously high in fiber, but it has much less glucoraphanin than the florets do. Why? It has to do with what the plant needs to do to protect itself or to survive. I don't really know.
Well, and the florets grow into where the seed to the flowers and then the seeds. So that's
yeah.
one of the
So
reasons.
Eventually, the destiny is saying it needs to have more glucoraphanin in those seeds. I mean, one thing that's fairly obvious when you look at the plant in the field is you have the big leaves that need to intercept sunlight. So what happens to them? They have a lot of chlorophyll in them, light harvesting pigment, and carotenoids, which are accessory pigments that you don't actually see until the plant dies, sort of like maple leaves in the fall, turning from green to orange, and you're unmasking those carotenoids. But the stalk doesn't have very much of that. It doesn't need it because it never sees much light, and certainly the roots don't. So let me stop with a lesson on plant physiology, because that's not what we're here for. But indeed, the spectrum of phytochemicals varies all over the place, depending on cultivar, the genetics, and the part of the plant, and the season, and so on.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. And I feel like we could have a whole course on an appreciation of plants and botany.
Oh, yeah.
Tony,
Yeah.
I would love for you to speak on, why glucoraphanin? So why did you start to focus more on just one compound when we know that broccoli contains hundreds, if not thousands of compounds? Why are we just focusing on glucoraphanin then?
Well, one of the things that Jed mentioned was that there is a great deal of variation in the broccoli plants that we see in the marketplace, the market stage broccoli. And that was another insight, that some broccoli had 10 times as much of these protective compounds as other broccoli. And there was really no way to tell in the supermarket which was some of, and then when somebody says, well, how much broccoli should I eat? Well, I don't know if you're eating the really potent stuff or the less potent stuff. It's all good, but there's no way to tell from the consumer, for the consumer to tell without doing lab tests. And it turned out that it wasn't that organic was necessarily better, or that it was grown in this area or this area. It literally has to do with those plants are adapted to a particular environment. And in some of those environments, the particular genetics is designed to produce a lot of the phytochemicals. So you really asked me two questions, and let me separate them if I can. But so one of the challenges was, if you want, well, first of all, let me just say that we totally endorse the idea and fervently believe in the idea of eating a very diet rich in vegetables and fruits that has a variety of compounds in it, and that the value of whole plants cannot be underestimated. However, if you decide that, well, wait a minute, I'd really like to be sure I'm getting a lot of this compound from broccoli, these particular compounds that generate sulforaphane that Jed mentioned. The problem is the plants are highly variable. So if I go to the supermarket today, I may be getting a plant that doesn't have as much glucoraphanin as the one that I got last week or the week before. And a little bit of this has to do with the fact that for those of us on the East Coast, our broccoli for 6 months of the year comes from California. And the farmers in California are growing broccoli that's going to look nice if it's been transported across the country. So to them, the most important thing is that it looks good on the shelf. You know, in our ideal world, we'd have a little chart that says this is how much glucoraphanin and sulforaphane producing is next to the broccoli in the store. So one issue was when we got to the idea of supplementation or adding these ingredients to to deliver them in other forms. And, you know, we take the concept of supplementation, the word literally. We're talking about supplementation, not substitution. We would never say, take a whole batch of these extracts or drink a lot of this tea and it's as good as eating this much broccoli, just because you're getting so many other things from the plant. But when you're talking about supplementation, what you want to be able to do is deliver a standardized amount. So every time you drink a cup of brassica tea, or you take a supplement that includes our brand of extract, TrueBroc, you are going to get what's on the label. And the way to do that is to start by growing a particular set of broccoli that we know has a meaningful and consistent level of glucoraphanin. And what you see behind me is actually a broccoli field of our very special broccoli plants that are grown in California and Arizona. And they are a particular variety that produces a lot of glucoraphanin. So that's the first. There was one piece of it. The second question I think you were asking was glucoraphanin versus sulforaphane, and Jed, you know, ultimately what boosts the body's protective enzymes is sulforaphane. It's the active molecule. However, sulforaphane is very volatile. It's very difficult to stabilize. And if you somehow made sulforaphane, you'd have to likely coat it with all sorts of nasty chemicals and so forth and bind it with things in order to keep it so that it could stay stable on the shelf. You know, therefore, you know, if you can eat raw broccoli, it's got a lot of glucoraphanin in it, you produce sulforaphane, that's for sure the best thing. Broccoli sprouts the same way. Sorry, I'm rambling. Sorry. Okay.
No, that is all good. But now I'm wondering if people listening are thinking, well, why do I care about sulforaphane? Like, what is it doing for me? And Jed mentioned your father talking about chemopreventative activity of sulforaphane. But Jed, do you want to kind of chime in here as to like the what if? Why do we care about sulforaphane? Why would that be one of our target compounds? Maybe just to list some basic functions, like what it can do for us.
Yep. Sure, will do. And then I want to come back to organic versus not, and to the issue of glucosinolate titer, glucoraphanin titer in the seeds. Yeah. So sulforaphane is look. We have to talk biochemistry. We have to talk chemical names here. I guess it's a class of compound called isothiocyanates. There are hundreds of them, but the crucifer family has about 120, 130 or so of them. They, as Tony mentioned, there are precursors called glucoraphanin that are inactive. They're converted to sulforaphane by an enzyme in the plants and in your gut and your microbiome. And that molecule, in the case of broccoli, the predominant molecule is sulforaphane. In the case of other crucifers, they have other names, but basically they do the same thing. They're just not as potent as sulforaphane. Sulforaphane is it is a potent indirect antioxidant. And what we mean by that is that the sulforaphane molecule does not act like vitamin C or one of the other direct antioxidants. It doesn't sacrifice itself on the altar of oxidative stress. What it does is it induces antioxidant enzymes that keep functioning over a course of hours to days, maybe even weeks. So sulforaphane goes into your body, it cranks up your protective system, your cytoprotective cell protection system. It cranks up your antioxidant system. We now know, Paul didn't know the exact mechanism back in 1992 when they discovered how potent sulforaphane was. They discovered back then that that there are certain responses, certain molecules, certain enzymes, protective enzymes that are formed in our bodies. But it took 10, 15, 20 years really of effort by Paul and his group and many others at Johns Hopkins and in Japan and all over the world, but primarily the Hopkins and Japanese teams, finally put on the map the mechanism, and it's called the NRF2 or NRF2 pathway. The average consumer doesn't need to know about that. It doesn't matter. But the bottom line is that it took many, many years to find out why, when sulforaphane gets in your cells, what it does. And that's important for developing drugs and developing protective strategy and understanding what nutrition's about. So it upregulates this NRF2. It's a nuclear transcription factor. And what that does is it churns away, inducing various protective enzymes in your body. Sulforaphane also is anti-inflammatory, different mechanism. We won't bore you with it. It also has a protective effect in terms of inducing a heat shock response, which protects proteins. It's directly antimicrobial against some bacteria and some viruses, and certainly some fungi. Some of that matters in terms of human biology. Some of it is, probably doesn't matter so much. So there are many mechanisms that we know of that by which it acts. But this NRF2 is the I'd say the crown jewel of sulforaphane's mode of action.
But Jed, doesn't, I wrote together with Romilly Hodges, we published a review article back in 2015, and it seems like there are many NRF2 activators. There are many things in our diet that jumpstart our body's protective defenses. So how does sulforaphane measure up against lycopene or turmeric or all of the other ones that are out there? Do we know?
Yeah, so we sure do. So it to date, as far as I'm aware, is still the most potent natural inducer, naturally occurring inducer of the NRF2 pathway, the most potent. The compounds you mentioned also do it, and we've done many and published many comparisons of different natural products, mostly phytochemicals. So, there are people in the world, there are companies now that have tried to, sulforaphane is a plant product. You can't patent it, right? And so most of us care about eating the fresh vegetables and perhaps supplementing. And there's good rationale for supplementing, especially as we get older. But there are also companies out there called drug companies who stand to make a hell of a lot of money if they successfully imitate a plant compound like sulforaphane. And so they have tried, and there are compounds, bardoxolone is the name of one of them, and there are 2 or 3 others that are in clinical trials that pharmaceutical companies are spending huge amounts of money testing. They are more potent inducers of the NRF2 pathway than sulforaphane. On the other hand, they're drugs. They're expensive and they have side effects. And so, I don't want to go there, but in terms of naturally occurring compounds, sulforaphane takes the cake. Yes, you can try to imitate the molecule, imitate the active site on the molecule in a lab and create something that's more potent, but then there is a huge amount of testing that needs to be done to verify that there aren't unintended consequences, which there always are. And as a healthy individual, do you want to be taking a drug for the rest of your life to ensure that you're going to hopefully be healthier? I don't know. That's
Well, we do have
philosophical.
a question here about supplements, right? So kind of the idea of taking a pill, taking a product. And I'm curious if Tony would like to speak to, when you have a tea or a coffee or some kind of food product that delivers a known amount of glucoraphanin, how does this compare to a dietary supplement format? Is there a superior source? Should we be getting the standardized amount of glucoraphanin in order to get sulforaphane that is produced in our body? Is it optimized in a certain format like tea, coffee, a protein powder, a standalone supplement? How do we actually make sense of all of the supplements based on what Jed is saying about how powerful we know this compound is?
Um, well, let me talk about it this way, which is our job, job of our company is to honor the depth of the science. So the first thing we wanted to do was make sure that when we made a extract that goes into supplements and goes into the tea and goes into coffee and some other beverages, that it was clean and safe, and that it was delivering a standardized, a reliable amount of this. So any product that contains TrueBroc, which is the brand for our extract, which is either a tea or a supplement, will tell you on the label how much of the glucoraphanin, how much of TrueBroc is in there, and we can trace that TrueBroc back actually literally to the fields behind me. The body, and Jed, you can correct me, but the body recognizes this compound, whether it's in a tea form or in a supplement form, and the chemical reactions in the body and the conversion to sulforaphane happen in any way. We have, it's very hard to know exactly how much sulforaphane somebody should have. And so from a commercial standpoint, the easiest way for us to talk about tea, for example, a cup of tea has as much glucoraphanin as you would get in one average serving of broccoli. Now, remember that there's no such, an average has all sorts of different factors involved, and some is much better than others. So we have to do some math and some extrapolation to get there. But we formulated the tea so there is 15 milligrams. It delivers 15 milligrams of glucoraphanin. We talked about this before with Jed, where we actually did the studies to show how quickly does the glucoraphanin get out of the tea bag and into the tea, and how long do you have to steep it for. And you should steep it for at least 2 minutes, and then we put a little extra in there in case you don't steep it long enough, and so forth and so on. But that makes us very comfortable that you're going to get 15 milligrams of glucoraphanin in tea. Supplements vary. A lot of the supplements have 30 milligrams of glucoraphanin. The way we kind of got there, and it's a little bit, it's an estimate, but 30 milligrams is as much as 2 average servings of broccoli. And one of the things we haven't talked about is there's all this epidemiological evidence that people who eat a lot of broccoli, or enthusiastic broccoli eaters, have fewer chronic conditions. And so when you extrapolate that and you look at what is the top 10% of enthusiastic broccoli eaters, well, they're eating somewhere between 2 pounds and 3 pounds of broccoli a week. And if you figure that out, that's like 6 ounces of broccoli. That's like 2 servings of broccoli a day. So I doubt that anybody is out there eating 2 servings of broccoli a day, but on average, that equates to something that the epidemiology supports. So that's, and it gives you a point of reference. Okay, 1 tea bag has as much glucoraphanin as you would get in 1 serving of broccoli. Again, we would never say drink the tea instead of eating a serving of broccoli. You're getting so many other things in broccoli, and the fiber and everything else, but you will get a meaningful and consistent amount of glucoraphanin that converts to sulforaphane in the body.
Well, and I'm thinking that it might be perfectly primed. And, my goal here is not to be commercial, but I'm just seeing like where you could be inserting products like this. It might be for people with sulfur issues, sulfur intolerance, or, they have dysbiosis, they have issues with SIBO, small intestinal bowel overgrowth. And maybe they can't eat the full broccoli because of all the fiber, but yet they want the active, they want a supplement, or they want the tea or some other product that's giving them a known amount. The only thing I'm thinking though is that not everybody converts to the same amount of sulforaphane, right?
So that's true. That's very true that they don't. But I think one way of looking at what Tony said, I think very well, is if you're eating the whole plant, you're getting this array of 50,000. I mean, all phytochemists guess, they pull a number out of the air, 50,000, 100,000 phytochemicals, and you're also getting all the fiber, as you say. So yes, you lose all the fiber when you take a supplement, but the consumer, and this may change over the decades, but at this point, a consumer cannot go to the grocery store and buy broccoli and know how much sulforaphane is in, or how much glucoraphanin, the precursor, period. They can't, unless they buy a pound of it, sample it, freeze it, send it to a lab, pay $150, $200 for a chemical analysis. Then they'll know, a week later, that equation just doesn't work. So I would argue that if you really want this indirect antioxidant to protect against a variety of neurodegenerative, neurodevelopmental, gastrointestinal, various conditions, or to help, it's not going to cure, but to help protect the body, crank up the antioxidant enzymes and so on, then maybe eating a really healthy diet and taking a supplement of glucoraphanin ain't a bad thing either, because you're not going to worry about overdosing on fiber by taking a couple of supplement tablets, but you may do better for yourself than taking a multivitamin, for example, if you're specifically worried about your oxidative stress level. Deanna, I just have to say, I know that a number of people have asked about organic versus conventional, and I've got to get my 2 cents in on that. I think if you have the option to eat organic vegetables, certainly, usually it's better. The phytochemicals are much more, when you get a conventionally grown plant that is grown with pesticides to protect against insects, the plant doesn't have the incentive to protect itself against those insects. So yes, typically it's a better bet, but as we all know, it's also much more expensive frequently to buy organic. So this becomes a practical issue. But in terms of phytochemicals, definitely you're better off getting, I think, eating organic, because they're just more chock full. Somebody also asked, I know people are these days very concerned, getting Viome tests and 23andMe and doing a variety of personal testing. I know someone asked about glutathione, GST polymorphisms. And for those who are really health hackers, I can say that we've, in a study that we did in China and published in 2014, GST status wasn't affected out of line with sulforaphane supplementation. In other words, how to phrase this more eloquently, if you had these GST or glutathione transferase null genotype, and so you didn't have certain of these enzymes, yes, there was a dramatic effect on air pollution detoxification, but it wasn't modified significantly by whether you took the broccoli beverage or not. So that's good.
That's
Anyway,
Jed, you know, the way I like to think about it, and it may, you know, please reinterpret it scientifically properly, is that, you know, these compounds raise these phase 2 enzymes. All this whole family of enzymes, perhaps, you know, several hundred, and they're overlapping. So if you're null for one particular of the phase 2 enzymes, likely some other one is going to help boost the function, because nature is you know, redundant in protecting us. I mean, you want to have more than one system. So if something gets knocked out, you know, we naturally have lots of different ways to try to get that. And so is that passes the science test, Jed?
yeah, absolutely.
I like that.
Yep.
But what about the other side of this? Like, how long do you have to be taking glucoraphanin or even a sulforaphane supplement to be upregulating NRF2? Like, I don't think that you just take one pill, one supplement, one tea bag, and all of a sudden you're set. It seems like there's a time of induction.
Well, that's true, but the largest body of evidence that we have from our trials was some of these large trials we did in China, and the enzymes are upregulated within a day. So most of them are upregulated very quickly. The converse question, how long does it take them to go away if you boost them and then stop taking glucoraphanin, is that's a much slower slope. It takes a while because what you've done is you've created these enzymes, which are proteins. They work, and they wear out. They break down. They're catabolized. So it may take days after you've induced protection. And so you could argue that if you were taking supplements, maybe you only would need to take them every other day. That's a difficult, excuse the pun, but a difficult pill for most people to swallow. Most people like to do things on a daily basis or a weekly, or, you know, so, but that's what
had the philosophy though that the body stops seeing it. If you're doing something every day, you don't give the body a chance. One of my great herbal teachers taught me 3 weeks on, 1 week off, 5 days on, 2 days off. You know, let your body see it fresh again.
Yeah.
Well, you know, one of the ways that I think about it is that we all have, or all of us have our enzyme systems, and some of us are working better than others. And the body can, you know, the whole theory of chemoprotection was, can you elevate the base level so you're more protected every day? And, you know, I sort of think about it a little bit like an analogy like heart rate. You know, you have a basal rate, and then when you need more of it, if you go into the gym and your heart rate goes up, you know, the body responds to this and raises your pulse. If we're in a situation where we're being bombarded by things in the environment that could be toxic to us, you want to be have your defense mechanisms up as well as they can be. So taking a supplement or taking the broccoli every day will keep you, you know, will keep your system working optimally, boost the effectiveness of the system. It's a little bit like a seatbelt. You don't know when you're going to get in an accident, but you don't just say, well, let me just put it on when I see a car coming at me. You protect yourself, and that's what you're trying to do. So, you know, these are just strategies to try to help the body do the things that it naturally tries to do in terms of protecting itself, and just help it do them better.
You're so right.
You know, I mean, it's simple in the sense that, you know, the body wants to have healthy food. The body wants to have healthy levels of all these things. So sometimes they get out of whack. And if we can give it a little extra help, then we've done something, I think, good.
Yes. Well, and I think that everybody's pretty much sold on broccoli. You know, people get it. They know that there's something good about it. What I'm seeing in terms of the comments and some of the questions that came in before is that there's almost a phobia or a sensitivity or an intolerance about sulfur containing vegetables. And some people, even on this thread here, are saying that they're sensitive to broccoli and they don't know why. What about sulfur intolerance? What about hydrogen sulfate? We were talking about gas earlier. is this an issue of the microbiome? Is this something where we need to get the gut on straight, or can we actually help the gut through the glucoraphanin and sulforaphane compounds?
Look, sulfur is a required element. We all have to have sulfur, and we all get it. I think there's certainly I'm sure are people who are intolerant of broccoli. I doubt that they would be, strictly speaking, allergic, but intolerant. I think a lot of the confusion comes, and let's, I don't mean to go down in the gutter here, but it comes with the fact that, the flatulence induced by broccoli is also smelly, and it smells like hydrogen sulfide. So, that's not appealing, at least to most people. And it's therefore, it's sort of, people may shy away from eating vegetables that cause that effect, which would be pretty much all the cruciferous vegetables. I'm not familiar with, you'd have to talk to a card-carrying nutritionist or dietitian. I'm not familiar with sulfur intolerance per se. People talk about, I noticed I can't read these questions in real time too easily, but I saw someone said something about it being allergic to sulfa drugs, and I don't think there's a connection there to what's going on with broccoli. But I suspect it's just distaste of or displeasure with the smell that broccoli causes, and it's associated with gas and pain in the gut. And all of those combine, and people say, I can't do it. In which case, sure, take a supplement. It's a great idea. And get your fiber from sweet potatoes and carrots instead. But
right. And some
I'm
people do have
oversimplifying.
hereditary fructose intolerance. And you mentioned that as part of the saccharide, you do have fructose. And for some people, they may not be breaking that down in such a
And
way.
there are other fructans in broccoli too.
Yeah.
Deanna, you had a number of questions about broccoli rabe, broccolini, and so on. I'd love to.
Purple broccoli, all the varieties. Yeah, let's talk about those.
Could I,
Should I be
yeah,
spending extra money on purple broccoli?
Can I defend the plant's honor for a minute? Yeah. So broccolini is actually a cross between Chinese kale and broccoli, and it's a trademark. It's a company trademark by, I forgot the name of the company. One of the either Japanese or California breeders. There's also something called aspiration, which you'll see in the market, which is similarly a cross between, I think, Chinese kale and broccoli. There's Brocco flower, which is a cauliflower cultivar. It's not broccoli, and it doesn't have sulforaphane or glucoraphanin to speak of.
Oh.
The most commonly asked question, and I saw it in some of the questions you got, is, well, what about broccoli rabe? Does that have, it's more bitter than broccoli. Does that have more glucoraphanin? Short answer, no. Neither broccoli rabe nor broccoli rapa or broccoli rape, those are actually not even the same species as broccoli, and they don't have glucoraphanin. The bitterness comes from something else, and offhand I don't even remember what that is. But I would love for any of your listeners, let me just do a quick screen share. So I did a paper in a chapter in an encyclopedia not many years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. And this encyclopedia cost $2,500, and you're not going to want to buy it. But I'm allowed, as long as I don't sell it to you, I'm allowed to share this. So through Deanna, I could share this. And I mean, I went through all of the Latin names and the common names of them. And in fact, taken from the USDA nutrient database, we have broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, etc., protein, water, fiber, the contents of these, all of these different cruciferous vegetables, including things like their lycopene and cholesterol and so on and so forth. So rather than go out and buy it for $2,500, I would love to share it via Deanna if you're allowed. I mean, I assume that as long as we're not reselling this chapter, we can do that. But I'll put everything in one place here, and it answers, I think, a lot of questions about what is, what's a close relative of broccoli. But don't be fooled, folks. Broccoli and actually a few varieties of kale, like red Russian kale, are really it in terms of good sources of glucoraphanin and sulforaphane. They all have isothiocyanates in them, but they're different. Yeah, that's an important distinction.
But what about, so I love diversity, and I like what both of you were saying about variety. So, you know, if we have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. If we have broccoli, it's like we look through the broccoli universe. But would it be interesting to be looking at broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower? You know, you go to the supermarket and you can see that they sell these medleys now, right? You've got your carrots, cauliflower, broccoli. Although I think I saw a study showing that the stability of having those things together is not so great versus having one type of vegetable on its own, which is unfortunate, but that was just something I remember seeing quickly. But should we be having a compilation of these different things? You mentioned cabbage, you've been talking about kale a little bit, radish, what about mustard and mustard greens? Curious about that.
Yeah, I'd say all of them, yes. I mean, a varied diet is the spice of life, blah, 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 blah. And whether you eat it all in one bowl or whether you have radishes today and cabbage tomorrow and kale the next day, look, it's all good. We can't all shop at a farmer's market 3 times a week and get the freshest of vegetables. So the other thing, and I know there was a question about this, is that frozen, quick freezing a lot of vegetables is really not bad, and it preserves the glucoraphanin more or less. So it turns out that some frozen vegetables, I think, are even better, would be better for you in terms of preserving phytochemicals than getting really ratty stuff that's been sitting in a in a Piggly Wiggly or a Safeway for a week. That's all wilted. You might actually be better off getting some, I can say the brand because there's only one, right? Bird's Eye frozen vegetables. We have looked at glucoraphanin content in them, and it varies in frozen vegetables as much as it does in vegetables fresh from the field, like what's behind Tony. But again, the consumer can't know without sending it out for a couple of $100 test every time he or she buys it at the supermarket, where they can get a supplement, and they can get a supplement. Yeah.
Right. So I'm curious, what are both, so on our closing here, I want to be respectful of your time and everybody, and we're getting some comments. They want that book chapter for sure, Dr.
Good.
It's a fascinating chart. You have to be a real vegetable nerd to want to read it all the way through.
Right.
Printing off those pages and putting them by your bed and studying them. So let's leave on a personal note. I mean, both of you have been in this field for a long time. I mean, you're experts, you're world experts on different fronts, but together, like, you're a powerhouse as it relates to broccoli. So not to say that we all need to do what you're doing, but I'm just kind of curious. Can you give us a window into, how do you eat broccoli and how often? And do you take a supplement? Do you drink the tea? What are both of you doing?
Tony, you go first.
Well, sure.
What kind of pizza do you eat?
Because I have Brassica coffee at the office, and because I love coffee, I drink 3 or 4 cups of Brassica coffee. So I'm getting 50 or 45 or 60 milligrams right there. I will have a decaf tea at the end of the day. I do take the supplements every day, but again, I also try really hard to eat as many fruits and vegetables as I can. And for all the reasons that you need, all the different things that are in there. I mean, the fact that, there isn't so much sulforaphane in one particular, in kale as there is in broccoli. Well, but there are other things, there are other phytochemicals that are valuable in all those things. And, nature has this unbelievable overlapping ability to protect us, and the plants developed it over 400 million years of evolution, and so I think you do a little bit of everything, and don't depend on any one way. But that to me, watching the science from I'm just trying to make sure I'm not running over here. Watching the science develop, which I've watched as an observer. the data has and the strength of the kinds of things that Jed and many, many other researchers have done, and the findings and the understanding of the mechanism have just grown and grown and grown. And so, you know, I every day I think it's more important to get my broccoli or my broccoli extract.
Well, and I think we were joking last time we were on the webinar that if we were stranded on a desert island, we'd want broccoli, turmeric, and I think you said blueberries too, right?
I love blueberries. I think they're I'm sure they're very complementary to broccoli.
And hopefully cocoa. Maybe you can create a combination product so that we get the best of all.
I think you
Chocolate
just
covered broccoli. I've been trying to get Mars to do chocolate covered broccoli forever, and it's just not in their DNA.
That's an opportunity.
well,
How about for you, Jed? What would you say? What's your daily practice like?
I echo what Tony said. I don't have the tea and the coffee that often, but I take a supplement and a glucoraphanin supplement, and I also frankly eat very healthy. I mean, I eat fresh fruits and vegetables. I stay away from a lot of carbs, except when I binge on pizza, you know, and I make sourdough bread now, like everybody else in the world that's locked down. But so, you know, a lot of variety and a lot of color on my plate. I don't like having a bland tan plate or an all green plate or you know, so I really like to color it up because I know what that means. It means more phytochemicals. And, you know, as I get older, having some history with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's in the family, I know that this antioxidant effect I don't know, but in my heart, I am pretty sure that it may protect against some of the neurological conditions that are going to nail a lot of us before we're say goodbye to this world. And I'd like to protect against it, especially knowing that it runs in the family. And I think that the antioxidant effect of glucoraphanin and sulforaphane will do that. And I've helped study that, and we have publications on that. It's not proven, but I'm bullish on it, let's say.
Very promising.
I think it's very promising. Yeah.
This is wonderful. By the way, we're getting some comments about how fantastic this has been. Great information. We've got somebody from Ireland who's saying good night. This has been so interesting. So
you're up late. Very late in Ireland.
Thanks for staying up. Yes.
Yeah, we appreciate everybody being on here, and it was maxed out. We only had 100 slots, and so that's why we recorded this. What I'm going to do is basically get this recording out to everybody who signed up, and we will put in the links that are relevant. Tony, you put in some links on the chat, and so I'll grab those. Jed will send me that chapter I can put into the email as well, and any other material. Oh, and we also have a product locator for anybody who is looking for the True Brock products. There is an easy way, a really nice site where you can see all of the different products that contain it so that you get the standardized amount of glucoraphanin. So I hope that this has been informative. I love this. I feel like you guys are my tribe, you know, talking color, talking plants. We need to get Michael Pollan in the room with us now.
Look, I think that the plants are very smart, and we've just been fortunate that we've been able to discover some of those things about them. I mean, it isn't that we invented these things, but
yeah,
the plants have been doing it, and we now finally understand it better, which is wonderful.
It's true.
Well,
Smarty plants.
Let me know if you get pollen. I tried to get him to lecture in one of my food classes once. He charges a lot.
Well, we'll get him through our book, through the books and the wisdom that he carries. So thanks again, everybody. And again, the links will be in the email that I send out.
Super.
Thanks. Take care.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
It's been a pleasure.